Hey, I'm Nicholas. So in this video, I will be talking about the U.S. Coast Guard, which is basically a federal law enforcement and military agency that falls under the Department of Homeland Security. Now, unlike most military agencies, the U.S. Coast Guard actually has full law enforcement authority, and it is also a part of the Department of Homeland Security. So while basically the difference is that most military agencies fall under the Department of Defense, and usually don't have any law enforcement function in and of themselves. Basically, so the U.S. Coast Guard is basically responsible for conducting maritime missions. So, for example, patrolling U.S. seas, enforcing federal maritime laws, uh, all that sort of stuff is really key to the Coast Guard's function. They have jurisdiction throughout the U.S. and its territories. They physically have jurisdiction anywhere within the U.S. economic zone, although the Coast Guard, as they state on their website, technically operate internationally, but their real legal jurisdiction is within the U.S. economic zone. So basically, they carry out a bunch of maritime missions and capabilities, like responding to disasters and boat crashes on the U.S. Sea, investigating crimes that take place on the U.S. Sea, and really anything. And when I say USC, so technically they can operate on any waters within the U.S. or economic zone, although they primarily operate on federally owned waters, because state waters and local waters, and what I mean by that is waters owned by state governments or local governments, aren't technically within their jurisdiction. However, if a crime takes place there that the U.S. Coast Guard has jurisdiction over, they can technically go over there and operate. They actually operate on both on both land and sea. They have a couple of divisions that basically have different duties, but for example, the U.S. Coast Guard Police, they operate primarily on land, or they also operate on sea, but they primarily operate on land because they are choosing to protect, or their duties to protect U.S. Coast Guard facilities, and those are on land while not on sea. Although the majority of the Coast Guard operates on sea. What's interesting about the Coast Guard that distinguishes it from most other law enforcement agencies is that they have basically the ability to carry out both a military and law enforcement function, which is interesting because most agencies cannot do that. I think I said this before, but they are a part of the armored forces. So there's around 6 military branches a part of or pretty sure 6 military branches a part of the armored forces, and the U.S. Coast Guard is one of them. It is one of the few agencies within the Department of Homeland Security that is capable of enforcing federal maritime laws. Oh, and so another duty of them is actually not only to enforce federal maritime laws, but also to enforce federal immigration laws. And as the reason why they do that is because basically, waters and seas within the U.S. often are one of the main sources for human trafficking and illegal crossings. So basically, they work with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and ICE to prevent illegal customs from entering U.S. Coast Guard zones. Now, they have authority to do that because they actually fall under the Department of Homeland Security, which is the primary department responsible for enforcing federal immigration laws. Now, while not all agencies under the Department of Homeland Security enforce it, the U.S. Coast Guard is one of them that is able to. The U.S. Coast Guard has a couple of divisions. Again, I said the U.S. Coast Guard Police. They also have the Coast Guard Investigative Service, which basically investigates anything taking place on U.S. seas or Coast Guard property. There's also the Coast Guard Maritime Enforcement Specialists, which those are actually interesting. They are federal military law enforcement. So basically, they what they do is basically they protect U.S. seas, like the Coast Guard, enforce federal maritime laws, but they are basically one of the higher ranks in the Coast Guard, and usually have a good amount of experience, usually 2 or more years within the Coast Guard. Anyways, not going to dive that much into those two agencies or those three agencies because they're I don't really want to get into it because I'm gonna write that in a different video. Although they also have the Coast Guard Intelligence, which is, or CSI, or I think it's called, CGI. Sorry. And basically, though the Coast Guard Intelligence is the military intelligence organization for the U.S. Coast Guard, and they provide intelligence to the Coast Guard's. I forgot who leads the Coast Guard, but anyways, they basically provide all the military intelligence needed to conduct wartime and non-wartime military operations. So yeah, they're very important. Although they are not, the Coast Guard Intelligence Agency is not a of itself. It is not the Coast Guard Intelligence Agency is not a law enforcement agency, although the most of the rest of the Coast Guard is. So basically, yeah. So that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and there probably will be other videos about other coast. There will be probably other videos about like the Coast Guard Investigative Service and the Coast Guard Police, because those are two interesting divisions I think I should talk about. Hope you like this video, and make sure to subscribe and like. Thank you.